Welcome to week 5 for ED 2491. The focus of this week's presentation will be about teacher-centered teaching strategies. In order for you to build a repertoire of teaching tools, it is essential to learn about and apply the art of teacher-centered approaches, strategies and techniques, such as using direct instruction, a variety of questioning techniques, and monitoring and encouraging whole class discussion. All these tools will enable you to become an effective teacher, as you'll be able to apply them to suit your teaching context and to help ensure that your students will achieve the learning outcomes that you want them to achieve. To begin building your repertoire of teaching tools, by the end of this week you should be able to plan a teacher-centered lesson, identify the strengths and limitations of the strategies that you need in your lesson plan, explain the main learning theory that underpins different teacher-centered lessons, plan for a whole of class discussion, design questions that target different levels of Bloom's taxonomy, and incorporate one or more of the productive pedagogies in your lesson planning. Sounds like a lot, but as I said last week, we do not expect you to have these down pat at the very beginning. It'll be a work in progress that eventually you'll do without even thinking about it. Now, the teaching approach you will use will depend on the kind of learning that you wish to occur. It will also depend on the learning theories that will suit your context. In some cases, you'll use behaviourist approaches, such as through direct instruction, where you'll provide a stimulus, get a response from your students, and then provide them with immediate feedback. There is also the constructivist approach, either the psychological approach where you construct learner knowledge through a variety of activities, or through social construction, where you construct student learning in a group, such as through group projects. Lastly, there is the cognitive approach, where you'll use a variety of instructional strategies that include reading comprehension activities and self-questioning techniques that encourage self-development. Here is a diagram of the teaching strategies continuum, from teacher-centered strategies, here on the left-hand side, to learner-centered strategies, or student-centered strategies, on the right-hand side. And this is basically a spectrum of where you have on the left-hand side largely teacher-centered activities, and on the right-hand side largely student-centered activities. And in the middle you have a combination of both. Basically what I've done is I've really simplified this continuum, but you'll get the idea that although there is no hierarchy that suggests that the superiority of one strategy over another, differing instructional strategies and techniques will lean towards either a more teacher-centered approach or a more learner-centered approach. This continuum is useful for visual learners when trying to ascertain the suitability of each approach and where your particular strategy will fit according to the theoretical approaches. Now, in each lesson you construct, you will need to decide on the pedagogical or teaching approach, the teaching strategies and the techniques you will use. To do this, you'll need to examine the teaching context, what you know about the learning context, including the theories, teaching approaches, models and strategies, what you know about your context, including school policy, approaches and strategies, and what strategies and techniques will be most effective, including details about your learners and other factors that will influence the selection of the tools that you choose. Now, these are two definitions that were in the LibGuide that you have this week. According to the definition provided by Kirchhoff and Effen, a teacher-centered lesson is an approach to instruction in which teachers carefully specify goals, present the content to be learned, and actively direct learning activities. Where in contrast, learner or student-centered lessons or instruction is an approach to instruction in which teachers guide learners towards an understanding of the topics they cover rather than explaining the content to them. Now, these definitions illustrate the differences between using a teacher-centered approach as opposed to a learner-centered approach. However, they do not specify the superiority of one approach to the other. They both have a role to play. So, as you can see in this diagram of the teacher-centered approach, you have the adult over here deciding on what is important for a student to know, After deciding on what the adult's going to instruct the child, here we have the decision-making process here. The adult instructs the child responds to the adult, and then the adult corrects and assesses the child. As you probably have no doubt and have guessed so far, this approach is predominantly what is known as behaviourist, as it applies the stimulus, response and feedback approach of what is common to behaviourist theory. So what follows are a brief outline of the three main teacher-centred approaches: direct instruction, whole of class discussion and questioning techniques. Now, direct instruction is when the teacher directs student engagement via explicit teaching, as in front of students like a lecturer would do. This mode of teaching has a teacher as a fountain of knowledge, the all-knower. Next to what you have is whole of class discussion, and this entails a teacher acting as a facilitator of class discussion, where the teacher will direct student engagement and largely control the discussion. This mode of teaching can be effective when monitored and controlled by teacher questioning and techniques. Lastly, questioning techniques entails the teacher using a variety of questioning techniques to promote student thinking about the subject or topic. This strategy is the most common and can be very effective, if done correctly, particularly when using open-ended questions. Okay, so to encourage thinking about the ideas in this module, in this week's tutorial workshop discussion board session, you will discuss the effectiveness of a variety of teacher-centered strategies. You'll think about what is your perception of direct instruction and whole class discussion, which one is the most effective for learning, or is it a combination of both? You'll also think about, when designing a lesson plan, what strategic factors must be considered for a whole class discussion to be effective. So please see the learning guide for further clarification of these questions, as the learning guide provides more detail and information for you to think about when discussing these ideas. In this week's personal journal entry, you will reflect on the teacher's role in direct instruction and whole class discussion, your past experiences of direct instruction, the positive and negatives to direct instruction, the challenges of implementing and running a whole class discussion, and lastly, how to ensure an effective questioning process. As with the previous questions, see the learning guide for further clarification. So to summarise week 5, we now know that there are many different teaching approaches, strategies and techniques that are used in effective teaching. We also know that teacher-centered strategies include direct instruction, questioning techniques and whole class discussion, and that the type of instructional approach, strategy or technique we use in teaching will be dependent on what we want to achieve and our personal teaching preferences. However, with all this in mind, we need to remember that no style or model is superior, as each is valid, but not in every context. It would be boring to always be taught with the same approach, as you are no doubt experiencing as a university student. If you have any further questions, please post questions about the subject or this module in the frequently asked questions located in LearnJCU, or contact me directly at my email. See the learning guide, subject outline, LearnJCU and Facebook for further contact details and information about this subject. Thank you for listening to Week 5 Teacher-Centered Strategies. Next week I'll present a video for Week 6 Classroom Management. Please subscribe and comment, as any feedback is appreciated. Thank you. Bye for now.